Hey, I'm Ash.
And I'm Callie.
And welcome back to Paved with Gold, the eating disorder recovery podcast. I would like to acknowledge the traditional landowners on which Callie and I are recording and extend the same respect to the traditional custodians of the lands from which you are all listening. We've talked at length about how eating disorders are not just about food.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. They're mental illnesses that can be caused by a number of factors and have, manifest in multiple different ways. However, we also know that they also are about food, and that we know that food and dietetics are a core part of eating disorders and eating disorder recovery. So it makes sense to devote at least one entire episode to this topic, probably more, but one for now.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Plus, it's been heavily requested and I think also incredibly necessary and a long time coming.
Yeah. I was going to say a long time overdue, I think. Yeah.
Yes. So having said that, we needed to get an expert in the field to talk about this. Today's guest is a senior eating disorder dietitian. She is the founder of the Embody Health Clinic and has her own podcast, the Embody Health Podcast, of which Callie has been a guest. She is a mum of two, has a lived experience with an eating disorder, and is an all-around legend, which seems to be a similar theme with all of our guests.
I feel like we very are particular about who we hand select.
I think so. So it is an absolute pleasure to welcome to the pod Kiah Paetz. Hello.
Woo!
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you all today.
We're excited too.
Yes, this has been an episode that we've been wanting to do for ages. It's so important. And like I said at the start, we know that eating disorders are all about, there's so much more to eating disorders than food and our relationship with food, but let's not kid ourselves. They are a large portion of eating disorders. And it's one of the number one things, like I know personally, when I was in eating disorder recovery, my dietitian appointments were my most anticipated appointment because it's the one that you need like the most help with and you need the most guidance. And that sort of also sometimes can be the most stressful times. So I thought it was extremely relevant to, bring someone on who not only gets all that, but also has a very expert knowledge of the field. So we're very, very happy to have you.
Yay.
It isn't about the food, but it also very much is about the food. So.
Exactly. So as we always start off with, can you tell us your personal experience with an eating disorder? Where did it all start for you?
Yeah. Thank you for asking me this. It's a really good question because it's actually something that I've never talked about before on a podcast or anywhere. And I've been really.
I was going to say I haven't heard it. Like I feel like I don't even know it, to be honest.
No, I don't. And I was like, do I even know it?
Well, we feel very privileged, so thank you.
Yes. I do need to record an episode, but it's just one of those things that, there's another thing to talk about, another thing on your list of things to do. Yeah. So my personal experience with an eating disorder started when I was about 15. So I was in about grade 11 of school. And I honestly don't think I even really knew that I had an eating disorder at the time. That there was no real major triggers as well. I did grow up in a household where, there were some comments about our body weight, but not majorly. Like it wasn't a major, my mum was never jumping on the scales super regularly. We weren't criticized about our weight on like a regular day-to-day basis. We had some here and there. So I think I found that interesting that, even though I was growing up with this relatively healthy relationship with food environment, I still developed an eating disorder. So it kind of started when I was about 15, and I distinctly remember it being on my birthday, I think was what kind of set it all off. Was I remember being like, I'm going to cut out all junk food this year. And so, it always starts with the diet. Didn't even realize I was dieting either. I always used to think, I've never been on a diet. But it's kind of just like these little things in disguise that we think are normal behaviors. And so kind of that quickly developed into a lot of obsessive exercise, obsessive tracking, my food intake, weight loss, and increased, obsession and rigidity around eating. For quite a number of years as well. And it really affected a lot of different areas of my life. I remember having fights with my family around eating, and, them commenting always about what food I was eating. I remember a lot of fear around going to social events. And, if any kind of social events were involving food, I just wouldn't want to go. And so as kind of like eating disorders happen, they give us a little bit of control, but in actual fact, they practically ruin our lives as well. And they really, just disconnect us from everyone and just make us feel like our entire identity is an eating disorder. And also kind of along this side of things, so obviously like I wasn't even a dietitian or anything like that either. Yeah, I was still just in like high school. And then I started my Instagram, which is the same Instagram that I have now, as a way to track my food. And Instagram back in the day, and like this is like 2012, right? So it's very, it's very different to what it is now. But Instagram back then was very toxic. I don't know if you two were back on Instagram then.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like full of like inspiration and a lot of visible abs and a lot of
thinspo and
everything. Yeah. And I kind of also went vegetarian at the time as well, and vegan eventually down the track as well. And at that time as well, on social media like Instagram and YouTube, there was a lot of YouTubers that had pretty bad relationships with food that were just flaunting as this is just a healthy way to eat. And I remember spending a lot of time watching all of these, and everyone's kind of like, you can eat all these foods and lose weight. And, it was just not a great time. There was a lot of diet culture in social media then. And not to say that it's any better now, it's just different now. But I definitely.
Now it's more monetized.
Yeah. Now it's more monetized. Yeah. Now it's hidden under the banner of wellness. Whereas then, they're like, oh yeah, just eat all these bananas every single day, etc.
I was going to say, came like what went into my head was like the fruitarian diet. And I was just like, I remember, I'm not going to say names, obviously, don't want to get sued. Yes. But I say that so often.
Yeah. There was a lot of different influences at the time as well. And I don't think this isn't just me alone that experienced this. Like, so especially when I first started working as a dietitian, I, realized, how many people this triggered eating disorders for them as well, which is just so heartbreaking. But anyway, so I started my Instagram and then kind of realized that I was like, oh, cool. Like maybe I want to be a dietitian. So, kind of started university still struggling with an eating disorder, and it kind of morphed as kind of I got older, socializing, things like that. It kind of morphed in different ways. My behaviors changed. I'm not going to go into that too much, but kind of still definitely struggling quite a lot with my relationship with food during that point of time and body image. And I think, the interesting thing as well is that's pretty common in my profession as well, especially at uni. Yeah. They did a big study about this like last year. I think they released, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but, a pretty high proportion of dietetics students have a bad relationship with food or kind of meet criteria for eating disorders or disordered eating. And so kind of you're also surrounded by this environment that a lot of people are like that as well. And then not that I kind of blame anyone, it's just the environment is very health focused, and then also you're also in this environment where it's very weight centric as well, the way that we're taught, so it probably wasn't the best environment as well, so kind of didn't really get huge amounts of recovery then. Also probably didn't necessarily realize I had as much of a problem as I did then as well, but a few different things happened in my life. Got my partner who I'm with now, started socializing a lot more. And then that almost kind of made me realize, okay, there is more to life than just what I look like. And so kind of my life pie of what sort of things are important to me changed. And I do kind of probably credit a lot of my recovery to my partner. Not that I want to put all, the balls in one basket there, but, just having someone that unconditionally loves you, and is really supportive of you was a really, really massive part for me as well. And so I really, really kind of attribute that to him, because I never actually sought treatment, which I don't recommend doing generally. Like everyone I think recovers differently, but I think I could recover way faster if I went and saw a psychologist or went and saw a dietitian. But I think the shame seeing a dietitian as a dietetics student would be pretty high. And I did try and see a psychologist once. Like I know I actually went and saw one twice, and I just didn't gel with them. Like they were just not my people. Now I'm a big fan of psychology. Like I've been seeing my psychologist for like 4 years straight, but I just didn't find my person, which also kind of, I think is important and to talk about, because sometimes it takes a few different times. And I think, if I wish there was someone there for me who kind of said, oh no, this is not okay. You should still go keep on trying to get help. But
yeah. It's kind of very authoritarian kind of role sometimes, isn't it? And it's kind of like, well, you kind of just keep seeing them anyway, regardless, because you have to. Yeah.
And I mean, it's very much like you're talking to this person and, you're telling them very in-depth details and you're trying to get them to understand you. And I mean, it's kind of the same as almost finding a partner that the same thing as when you find a partner to date, right? You're finding someone who gels with you, who understands you, who speaks the same kind of language as you, not like literally, but trying to understand you. And it's one of my biggest bugbears.
Potentially know more of you.
Exactly. And it's one of my biggest bugbears actually, in the fact that it takes every single, like, I'm never saying that like psychologists should work for free ever, but it's really frustrating when you only have a limited number of appointments, especially if you're covered by like the eating disorder care plan or things like that, and you only have a certain number of appointments that are covered and you have to shop around to find someone that gels with you. It took me ages to find anybody, including all throughout my recovery. Never saw a psychologist consistently because I didn't like any of them. It was only later on when I was getting treatment for my anxiety, I found someone I loved, and then she went into research. I'm like, God's sake.
But it's also why, like, now as a dietitian, we do discovery calls. So like, we have free 15-minute discovery calls, because if they don't gel with me, we're probably not going to work together long term. And I think that's really, really important. And also because of the way I practice as well, like dietitians, when people say, oh, I want to go see a dietitian, they think, oh, weight loss, whereas I don't really do that. So I don't do that. And so it's important to kind of be like, no, this is my approach. But anyway, kind of then and then there was like a lot of different things that really helped with my recovery. I think, to be honest, being a dietitian really did help, especially at the start. Especially kind of getting into more like the intuitive eating haze side of dietetics, and the eating disorder dietetics, and learning more about it, because unfortunately it's not something that we learn about at uni, and I didn't really understand it at uni. It was only after practicing as a dietitian and then seeing the massive impact of, how bad weight loss is, like, and, prescribing weight loss, that, kind of went into the took a deep dive into the eating disorder field, and it kind of really helped me heal myself. I don't think there was anything in particular that, I think it was just, a lot of the basic things like eating regularly, eating enough, building balanced meals, listening to your hunger and fullness. And it's forever a journey as well, like I definitely think right now I'm probably in my like best place in terms of my relationship with food, in best place in terms of my relationship with my body, even though my body doesn't look the quote unquote way that I would love it to, based in this internalized ideal in my mind that society has created for me. But I can still respect my body. I can still appreciate my body. It does wonderful things. And so I think, I always practice that body neutrality now. And so definitely don't have any issues, and haven't had for quite a while now, probably like 5+ years. But yeah, I definitely think it's almost a privilege having a lived experience of an eating disorder, because it's like explaining an eating disorder to someone who has never had it is very it's very different. Like you can
Yeah.
understand, okay, someone's got a lot of thoughts around food, but experiencing that obsessive thoughts around food in your body is something different than just reading thoughts around food in your body.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't really make sense. Like I find it so often, especially like with parents of clients, and you kind of like you trying to explain, like I get that, you really want your child to do something, but it isn't that easy, or you might not understand that, well, why can't like just eat it, then it's done, or, why are they behaving this way and like crying, and like they could just do it. And then it's kind of like, well, like it doesn't make sense to you because you've never lived it, thank God, but it makes total sense to them, and like I totally get it. And so we just kind of have to hold that stage for a bit, and then hopefully it won't always be that hard, but right now it is, and that's really okay. And that doesn't mean anything more than we don't have to read it and into it like this big narrative around it. It can just be really hard.
Definitely. Yeah. So there was never one day that I was like, I'm recovered. It was more just like over a progress of time, learning, seeing psychologists, getting kind of support, lots of different things really helped. And then definitely, it's one of the biggest things now, like I have a daughter, or two daughters, sorry, like as you do, Callie, it's just a whole nother ball game. It kind of brings up things for you that you're like, oh wow, I didn't realize I had that about myself. And I have so much anxiety and fear of Skylar and Summer ever developing an eating disorder. So building a home where we have like a healthy relationship with food is by far the most important thing for me.
Huge protective factor for them too, right?
But then we still live in this world. We live in this world where people make comments about food and body, so there's only so much that you can protect. But yeah,
it's all about having a dialogue, right? Rather than just because the one thing is like, no, we never talk about weight in this house. It's like that's not going to help either.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I think it's just so like you've hit the nail on the head there. Like it is, and it's something that I think about so often, and so many things will sort of like happen around, maybe meal times with Blake or like a snack time, and like I'll kind of remember maybe the way that it used to be, and kind of like I was talking about it to someone the other day of like, oh well, if Blake wants to have a snack before dinner, I don't care. Like, she's obviously hungry. She can eat whatever she wants before dinner. If she doesn't eat dinner, I'm not that fussed. Like, I trust her stomach. I want her to trust her stomach. So if she wants a snack before, she can have it. If she doesn't eat dinner, I don't care. I'm not going to make her sit there and eat it. And I think I just remember, like, I guess we all grew up in the same sort of time of like, you sat there and you ate your dinner. No, you can wait for dinner. You're going to ruin your appetite. And I kind of just think of that more, and I'm like, so what if I did ruin my appetite? Like, like, is that the end of the world? Like, is that the most important thing? Or like, I had to sit there and finish my dinner past my fullness cues. Like, isn't it more productive for them to learn that and, trust that? And sure, you don't have to eat all your dinner. I don't care. Like, we can save it for tomorrow, or I don't care what we do with it, So I think it's really interesting when we think about it in those sort of contexts as well, isn't it?
Definitely. But there's no one talking about that. Oh, well, sorry, we are talking about that, I'd argue. But I feel like generally it's, not talked about enough.
I completely agree. And I think even, sorry to get into this kind of bit, but like already, but I feel like I notice so much within the sort of, what's the word, like term, I suppose, like raising kids space, like motherhood and parenthood sort of spaces where it's like, I don't know, placing so much importance on making sure that they do this and making sure that they do that. And it's kind of just like, well, they're their own little humans. Like, like Blake literally just snacks all day because that's her form of eating. That's actually my form of eating too. I snack so much and it works really well for me. So why would I expect her to be any different? Like, it's just so funny that we have these expectations on little people when they're humans, and we want them to form that and grow up to be really like self-regulating and healthy humans, but we're squashing that from the get-go. It's just really strange to me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I know that, we're always talking about, when you, if you think that you have an issue with eating or you have a problem with an eating disorder, make sure that you go and seek help as soon as you can. And again, that stance will never waver. That's always what we're going to say. And one of the key things that we do think that is really important is to find a dietitian to help navigate your eating disorder recovery, as well as figure out what your body needs and figure out and pinpoint the underlying food related issues, which is why dietitians are the most incredible tool in an eating disorder recovery arsenal. So can you please tell me, Kiah, what is the role for a dietitian, and specifically in eating disorder recovery? What role does the dietitian play, and why does everyone need one?
Good question. I feel like, I have to
A loaded one.
give a good rap for dietitians here. So in terms of the role that we play, the way that I almost best describe kind of some of the work that we do as dietitians is I almost see like if we have like a Venn diagram with like a circle in the middle is a dietitian, GP on one side, like medical, and like psychology on one side, like being psychologist. Like I kind of think dietitians are in the middle in terms of we understand a little bit more about the psychology side. We're not psychologists. We don't go down, do the trauma stuff, but we do counseling, like nutritional counseling. And then we understand probably more than a psychologist, the medical side of things, because we do a lot of like biochemistry and medical background. And so we kind of understand how the body, how the body can get affected in response to kind of eating disorders. And so we can be that really good like middle person that's kind of like keeping an eye on a few things when it comes down to, psychology and medical, and then also identifying if potentially even other health professionals need to be used as well, like social workers like yourself, exercise physiologists as well. And so a lot of the time, sometimes people come and see us because they're like, okay, I need help with my diet. And then we're like, oh, okay, there's potentially an eating disorder here. There's potentially some disordered eating here. Let's build you a treatment team. Yeah. And so, so we almost kind of sometimes be this like screener sometimes in, before maybe someone even realizes there's an issue there. And I would always say, like, as you kind of say, you don't have to have an eating disorder to get help. You don't have to have a diagnosis to get help. But what we do is really different from person to person. And it's actually changed a lot in terms of the way I practice now compared to what I did when I first graduated 7 years ago, because we're not trained very well to become eating disorder dietitians. We're very much trained in a like medical model of identifying the issues that you have, and these are all the things that you need to fix, and this is how you do it, and you do that all in one session, and that does not work.
Sort of like food is medicine type stuff, right?
Yeah, pretty much, right? Like, this is your protein requirements, this is your food requirements, so it's very different. And so kind of the way I work now is changed a lot, and it works a lot better as well. So kind of when I'm seeing someone with an eating disorder, we work on different things based on kind of where they're at. So we kind of like to build like nutrition as a little bit of like a foundation. It's hard to engage in other, even like, psychology or other social work. It's sometimes hard to engage in other treatments if you're not eating enough to fuel your body.
For sure.
No matter what eating disorder diagnosis you have, no matter what BMI you have, like, or what weight you are, like none of that stuff. It doesn't matter where you are. It's hard to do other stuff if we don't have just like a foundation with our eating. And so we talk a lot about, how do we build a balanced meal for you? How do we eat regularly? What does almost the framework of your house of eating look like for you? And come up with different strategies around what's making that hard for you. Because that's the biggest thing that I work on is, we can say, okay, yeah, eat regularly. That's all simple, on paper, but it's actually quite hard in reality. And so I would say 90% of my job is actually troubleshooting those difficult things. So whether you're finding it hard to maintain a regular eating pattern, and we're talking about some strategies around getting support for that from other people, or setting alarms on your phone to remind you to eat. Maybe you're finding it difficult to build balanced meals because the idea of going to the supermarket is so overwhelming and complex for you, and there's so many things, and we talk about how can we break that down? Can we make, kind of some staples at home that we have in the fridge? And so it's really about, okay, what are kind of some of the barriers getting you to kind of get that that just balanced nutrition there to nourish your body so that you can, think more clearer, give yourself the ability to listen to hunger and fullness cues in the future, but just get that really good foundation. And then from there, we work on a lot of different things depending on what comes up for the person. So we might work a lot on like fear foods and identifying some of our fear foods and challenging some of those inner monologues that we might have around fear foods and going, okay, is there actually nutritional evidence about that? Like, are carbs bad for me? No.
Clear that up really quickly.
Yeah.
Like insider tip, no.
Insider, you can have carbs. And kind of, providing strategies around, how can we incorporate those foods into our diet? What does that look like? And what does kind of your relationship with food, what do we want that to look like in the future? So we tend to kind of have like the end point of trying to use a few intuitive eating principles if that's suitable for the person. So working on hunger and fullness, working on being able to socialize with other people, working on, being okay to be spontaneous with food. But we take it person to person because what works for one person is not going to work for other people. Some people will have great ability to identify their hunger and fullness cues, and for other people, especially people who are neurodivergent, that they may not ever be able to do that, and that's okay as well. So it's just really taking that specific person-centered approach to getting people to meet their nutritional needs, essentially, in a summary.
We love that around here.
How much do we bang on about individualized person-centered approaches? No, but actually I was gonna just ask, like, because that's, like I said, music to our bloody ears. Like, I think if you're not working from a person-centered approach, like, what the hell are you doing, basically? Like,
you're doing it wrong.
Damage, right? But with the person-centered approach, I just wanted to ask, and I know that you touched on neurodivergency a little bit, as a neurodivergent myself and fellow neurodivergent, how, I guess, like, I'm assuming, I guess, that you would get a lot of those neurodivergents coming through your door and seeing you and trying to navigate this space. And I know I touched on before that, like, I'm a snacker, for example, but, in my eating disorder recovery, I very much had to follow this structured meal plan. And that was really difficult for me, I suppose, because it just wasn't my way of eating. But also, just to a degree, it was kind of essential in the beginning. I just, this is a bit of a backwards question, but I'm just wondering how you maybe as a dietitian navigate those sort of things and meal plans. And I guess a meal plan, what it looks like for me could be completely not helpful for Ash or someone else. I'm just wondering how you navigate that sort of stuff and maybe the importance of that.
Absolutely.
Great question. And it really, again, individualized approach depends on where the person is. Like, so for example, like, meal plans, I really hate meal plans. I a lot of the time don't use them. Like, I would say I don't even know if I've got anyone on meal plans at the moment. It's not super common in my practice, but it depends on where the person is. So meal plans, if someone is in early recovery and there's potentially a bit more risk for, like, the biggest thing for us as dietitians is we want people to be medically stable when they're engaging with us. Like, that is really important. Don't want people to end up in hospital, don't want people to have a cardiac event. And so meal plans may be important in those early stages of recovery where someone has absolutely no idea what to eat, how much to eat, what even to eat, and has so much decision fatigue around eating and how they should even go about eating, that a meal plan might be really, really useful in helping them go, okay, this is how much I do need for this stage of recovery. If they're kind of later stage of recovery, we're not kind of experiencing that medical risk, maybe we're working on a little bit of like identifying hunger and fullness cues, if that's, useful for the person. Chances I'm probably not using a meal plan there. However,
I was just going to say, actually, because I mean, there might be some people who are such in that early stage that they've forgotten what being hungry feels like, maybe because they're just always hungry and they've just, they've blocked it out or they've numbed it out or they're just so used to it, right?
Yeah, or they might not have it. A lot of people early stages of recovery just don't have it because they don't. And it's not until they start eating, and then they develop those hunger cues again. But kind of later stage, I don't really use meal plans as regularly because like the goal is to try figure out what eating looks like for you, right? Like, yes, the 3 meals, 3 snacks is always a useful basis, but it's not always going to work for everyone. And the cases that I do use meal plans is like sometimes, especially if like this often happens with my more neurodivergent clients, is the act of shopping, cooking, meal planning is a lot of steps.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of steps. It's a lot of steps. And,
Yeah.
if our capacity levels aren't great, all of that's just too overwhelming, and it means that we might not eat. And so meal plans can be really useful then to be like, oh, okay, this is what I'll eat. It's just there. It's written, but I tend to do like meal guides rather than meal plans.
Love that.
Yeah, so that we can have options, because no one wants to be told what to eat. That just generally doesn't work.
Yeah. And everyone has likes and dislikes.
Yeah, exactly.
What? No, they don't. Stop it, Ash.
Yeah. Does that kind of, I guess, answer that question?
Yeah, no, it does. It does absolutely. Because I
Yeah.
think we just see it so often in this space, especially where like meal plans are kind of like I think a lot of people think that when they're going to see an eating disorder dietitian in their recovery, they're going there and they're going to be handed a meal plan, and they're going to have to eat off this meal plan, or like track and send maybe what they're eating, or I don't know, filling out a meal plan diary and ticking off once they've eaten it. And I think it's a conversation I know I have a lot with people around like, well, if that doesn't work for you, you can speak up, and that doesn't have to be the way that it is. Because I feel like so many dietitians are just so great at being able to adapt and, pivot, and depending, especially you, Kiah, depending where the person is at, maybe that's relevant for a little bit, but then maybe, discovering a little bit further along. But I feel like even that can be really scary for people as well, because it's like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to though, because I never have. How do I get there? And I think it's really heartening to hear that that's something that you work on, because that's real life.
Yeah, definitely.
Meal plans are real life.
Yeah, and that's what I say to a lot of my clients is meal plans aren't real life. I do food diaries. I do like photo food diaries, but I don't.
They're helpful though.
Yeah, but it depends how you use them, right? Like if you've ever tracked a food diary for multiple days, taking photos of your food every single day, every day of the week, it's very time laborious. So I never, that's kind of what I say to my clients. I say, okay, like, here's a food diary app that I use. Try to fill it out if you can. If you can't, that's okay. Maybe you can only do one day. I never have expectations. I go, okay, it helps me understand what you eat, so I get it in like a look into your life and see what you're challenging, you're experiencing, because they can often write what their thoughts and their feelings are around food, and that's sometimes easier, sometimes doing that in the moment than being like, oh, how did I feel about eating that 5 days ago? But I also try to reduce expectations, because if we have these, okay, you have to track your food every single day for 7 days, that immediately makes you feel like a failure when you don't do that, which 99% of people are not going to be able to do that.
A bit diet culture as well. Like it just reminds me kind of like of my Fitness Pal or something as well. If it was this solid expectation, it feels like it almost like plays into eating disorder behaviors a little bit as well,
I
right?
was just going to say that. It seems you're almost like, yes, sometimes it can be really helpful. Like for me, it was helpful in the beginning of also, tracking everything I ate, and then going to eating disorder recovery and tracking every single thing I ate. And it almost kind of triggered me, because I'm actually having to write down even more. And when you're in your eating disorder, and for me, when I was tracking, I knew exactly the amount that was in each of these things. And I could just do the calculations in my head, and it would just freak me out. So it was more, one thing that my dietitian did was she said, okay, just break it down into carb, protein, veg, and just like how many serves do you have? And then that's, that was really helpful for me, rather to kind of take away this idea of tracking everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Again,
Individualized,
that's sort of person-centered. We're all about that. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. And it's real, this is something I love about dietitians is, like I said, it's no longer this, going to your dietitian, just getting a meal plan and, going away. It's now there's so much psychoeducation. And I think it is just such an important piece of the puzzle in eating disorder recovery. I think a lot of people sometimes think it is just food. And again, it's that concept of like, it's not about the food, but it is about the food, right? Like, yeah, you guys are covering the food side of things. I was in a dietitian appointment with one of my clients actually, and the dietitian goes, anyway, now back to the food talk. And my client goes, oh, for God's sakes, like, you always just want to talk about food. Like, get something more exciting to talk about. And we're like, oh, imagine that, the dietitian wanting to talk about food. It was really funny.
It's kind of like that just eat, but it's not just eat.
Right? Yeah. Like, I feel like you guys are just, this really beautiful sort of link into like, I talk a lot about like building your narrative of who you are. And this is part of building your narrative for day-to-day life, because it's an essential part of living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to sort of dive into as well is we all know, obviously, eating disorders are extremely diverse and people experience them in completely different ways. But we know that eating disorders have a massive effect on the body. And we've talked about this in our social media episode, Callie, about how eating disorders can be seen as glamorized. And I mean, get fucked, basically. They're so not glamorous.
In a nutshell.
Yeah. But can we talk specifically maybe more of a physiological point of how eating disorders affect the body in general and what the importance of maintaining adequate nutrition is? Because I know that may seem like a very obvious question, but in this world of health and wellness and everybody having their own bloody opinion, I'd love to hear a dietitian's opinion based in science.
Yeah. And so I guess there's a lot of different things here depending on what the eating disorder is. Like what's going to happen with someone with anorexia is probably going to be a bit different to someone with binge eating disorder as well, and ARFID. But I'll kind of probably talk about some of like the starvation based symptoms and like
restriction, purging,
restriction,
binging, those kind of things, I guess.
Yeah. So like I guess with like restriction in particular, and like we can say restriction can happen at any body weight,
Exactly. Yeah.
I think, and you guys probably maybe have talked about this before, when we have this idea of eating disorders, we always think about anorexia. We always think about this underweight person, probably a white girl as well.
Mm-hmm.
But eating disorders can happen any age, any gender, any, race, ethnicity, body type. They don't have a look as well, which is really, really hard as well, especially I think, if you are in a larger body and you're experiencing an eating disorder and not being taken seriously by the world, maybe even by your own doctor. But it doesn't matter what your body weight is. If you're restricting your body, you're restricting your food, you're still going to have a lot of the same physiological impact. So things that can happen is things from like a heart perspective, like our heart muscle mass can reduce. Our metabolism can reduce as well. Like our metabolism is maintained by eating enough food every day. And so often when we say, oh, my metabolism slowed down, it's probably just because you're not eating enough. And so like those can happen. Our muscle mass in general can start to deplete. We can feel weaker. Our heart rate and our blood pressure can get affected as well. They can decrease. We might feel cold, we might feel dizzy, we might have lower hormone levels, we might we might not have that like sexual desire even anymore, which I think is probably something that's not talked about enough as well. We might start accumulating fluid, might experience things like hair loss or dry skin as our body doesn't get the nutrition it needs. And so those are all physiological stuff that can happen no matter what body weight you are if you're kind of undergoing restriction. And I think I would say as well, like that can also happen if you're dieting too. If you're dieting, like you're intentionally dieting because you want to lose weight, that can all happen as well. And we know kind of the link between
restriction, right?
Yeah, it's restriction, right? So like from like a physiological perspective, Those are probably like the big things that we see in more like restriction. But across kind of like any eating disorders, might get some of those emotional changes. Like we might feel a bit more depressed or irritable or not interested in things anymore, only interested in things that relate to food. We might be finding we're thinking about food all the time. We might change our eating habits in terms of we're eating too fast or eating too slowly, or find we're even like hoarding recipes or obsessively watching like videos about eating as well. It's something that's quite common. Like from like a social change as well. Like we might see, not being able to go out with friends, not feeling like ourselves. We might find that we're not even like the funny person we used to be. So it's kind of quite prevalent. And then like from like I guess a binge eating disorder perspective as well, we can also potentially sometimes get like negative effects in terms of like effects on like our reflux and like our ability like for our esophagus to work properly. Like from bulimia might get some effects with like the acid on your teeth and cause like teeth rotting and decay as well. And yeah, essentially just massively increase your risk of medical emergencies as well. So I guess that's the biggest thing for us, is we always make sure everyone is medically monitored when we're working with them, especially at the start. Depends on kind of where they are in treatment. And we get their heart checked, we get their blood pressure checked, their electrolytes checked through their blood tests, and we have to do that on a regular basis because the eating disorders are so dangerous. They're the highest mortality risk of any mental health condition. And also when you start eating as well, things can change too in response to eating. Like we can have something called refeeding syndrome happen, which can essentially mean like our electrolytes shift in our body cells. And so, that can create cardiac events essentially as well. So essentially the effects that there's massive amount of effects, like and even long-term fertility issues, osteoporosis, osteopenia. Like I've got osteopenia thanks to having an eating disorder, and that's now something that even though I don't have an eating disorder now, I have to live with for the rest of my life as these average bones. So recover.
Yeah, 100%. And as you were saying that, like I was even thinking, like when you're talking about emotional stuff, like psychological stuff too, like how often do you see people who can't really work on anything psychologically because they don't have the energy on their brain to be able to do that? Or, perhaps if we're talking about trauma, their triggers are going to be much less able to cope and use other skills to cope with their triggers if they don't have the space in their brain to do so, which they need with nutrition. So it's just this huge cycle, isn't it?
Massive cycle, yeah. And so like eating enough is the thing that we need to work on, above all else, and so that's what we do. We just focus on getting us to eat regularly, eat enough, whatever that looks like for the person.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just with all of that, this is a bit of a random question, but so feel free to leave it or whatever. But I was having a conversation with someone, one of my clients this week, just about, I guess, the shift that we sometimes see that happens in eating disorders that go from, perhaps a restrictive or whatever it is into this kind of more of an orthorexic kind of eating disorder, into this, okay, well, I'll eat, but it needs to look a particular way. I need to make sure it's, whole foods. I need to make sure it's not out of a package. And I remember going through that shift, and it was really difficult, I think, especially now as a neurodivergent, because packaged foods, like I know what they're going to taste like. I know what the texture is. I know they're available. I know, I can get them anywhere out.
And they're
I
consistent.
feel like it just adds. And they're consistent, absolutely. Like you know what you're getting. And then,
like from a pure like product
delicious,
perspective, like a lot of these packaged
100%.
foods are like on like a production line a lot of
They're
the time.
exactly the same. I know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
100%. But I feel like in eating disorder recovery sometimes, and certainly even in the treating space sometimes, it's kind of this really, and yes, don't get me wrong, whole foods are really important in a diet, but also not always accessible. So I was just wondering if we could talk a little bit about that, because I think it is just so prevalent, and I see it so often of these shifts, and it just creates a whole new thing that you then have to challenge and get over. And Like it's just swapping one for the another, basically.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty common to see shifts from one eating disorder to another, whether it's like more anorexia to orthorexia, whether it's anorexia to binge eating as well. Because at the end of the day, when you have an eating disorder, you know how to eat based on rules. Like that's how it works, right? Like, the rules that you've set for yourself from whatever the rules are. And then shifting to another eating disorder is just based on rules again. And so it almost provides a bit of a sense of safety as well. And sometimes we just really don't know what to eat. So like kind of when we see that more orthorexia side of things, I'd be like, my kind of initial instinct is like, we haven't probably fully recovered, have we? We might be in this like quasi recovery section. Like that's the big thing. Because like when I kind of work with people, we focus on eating regularly. We focus them on eating enough, macro, micronutrients within their foods that they're comfortable with. But then the next stage is challenging their fear foods. And that's a really important challenge. If you're not kind of challenging your fear foods, you're still kind of probably sitting in that restrictive space as well, even if it doesn't look as restrictive as previously. And I think that, like this makes me think of a lot of my clients who've had this experience where they've had, they maybe have been hospitalized with their eating disorder, and what they're eating now is very different to what they were eating before. What their body looks like is very different to what it was before, but they're still struggling a lot, and it almost makes them feel invalidated that they're struggling so much now because it's different to what it looks before. Like they may be feeling like, oh, I'm not that bad, but it's still not great. Like you're still struggling on a day-to-day basis.
Not paying as much attention. People like, I'm sort of functioning a bit better now. So people are thinking that I'm doing a lot better, right?
Yeah, exactly. And family and friends might think that as well. But the fact of the matter is, if you've still got a lot of, obsessive thoughts around food, if you're still restricting certain foods, you probably haven't fully recovered. And so you probably, and like, look, you might be, hanging out there for a while. You might not be ready to take the next step as well. But if you do want to kind of have that flexibility, food freedom, you kind of got to do the work, got to do the challenges. Yeah.
I think a lot of people hear the word restriction and they might automatically think, oh, it's calorie restriction, but not necessarily. It could be just restricting certain types of food and limiting the certain foods that you're having. And that is still restriction because it's still a food rule. It's still tightly controlled. And I think that's kind of the key distinction there.
Restriction is restriction.
Restriction
people
is restriction.
Exactly.
And it does matter. It can look so different. It can look like, I can't eat, I don't know, carbs is always the one. Carbs, I can't eat with bread. Or, I
sugar,
can't eat,
right?
Yeah, or I can't eat past 7 p.m. Or I can't eat anything in a packet, and, all these things just add to food rules and just make the, and I think the thing is as well is, if we look at eating disorders, disordered eating on a spectrum, a lot of this stuff's normalized. Like, people might not have eating disorders and they might experience disordered eating and, just saying, oh, I kind of don't want that. It's so normalized in our society. Oh, she's just going on a health kick. And I think that's the really, really hard thing is, we do all this work with our clients of, fighting back against diet culture and these messages and fighting back against all these, unrealistic ideals that our bodies are put on, especially, women, but actually, to be honest, everyone. But we all still live in this world where, we experience it every single day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, like you have those friggin' like Instagram reels at the moment of like influencers standing in supermarket aisles, like reading the ingredients of packages, being like, it's got this in it, it's going to like, I don't know, fucking erode your something. I don't even know. Some horrible sounding thing.
Every day there's a new thing to be scared of.
Yeah.
I'm rolling my eyes like so hard.
So anyone doing this work, like, and that's why I say to all my clients, is like, it's hard. Like it is so hard to recover from an eating disorder. Like it is so, so hard. It's like you have to face food every single day. You got to do the mental work every single day, and
diet culture and
diet culture, and plus of all the effects that eating disorders had. Like, it might affect your support. You might not have as much support, so you're trying to recover and you're alone. It's just hard. It's just hard. And so anyone that's going through this is amazing for doing it.
Agreed.
Completely. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I want to talk about something that I've been dying to speak on, and get someone I can just like pick their brain and just get it all in an amazing soundbite to deliver into people's ears. So
perfect.
No pressure. I think that people think, and people in general, and I mean this at a generalized population level, I think people think that they have such control over their weight, and people can actually manipulate their weight on a long-term basis, as much as I'm sure a lot of diet brands would like us to believe. But I think a lot of people just don't have a basic understanding on how weight works. So I was wondering if we could dive in a little bit into that. I know that there's set point theory, but also like weight fluctuation on a daily basis, fluid retention, digestion. How does it all work?
Age.
Aging, oh my God, metabolism, all that. I mean, I know this could be literally an entire episode itself, so just condense it down.
No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. Bring out my best
but make it
physiology knowledge. Yeah.
Can you just kind of break that down for us? Because I think it's just a lot of people just have no idea.
Yeah. It's a big topic. So essentially our weight, we definitely do not have as much control around it as we think. It's very, very much largely genetic. So, we don't really get to choose our weight. It's a combination of our environments, our parents, our genes essentially. So there is this thing called set point theory. So it is still a theory, right? But it's your body weight likes to sit at a particular spot. And what will happen is, it'll sit at that particular spot. Let's just say it's 80 kilos, for example. When you kind of maybe like eat a little bit more food than your body, maybe needs that particular day or kind of wants, your metabolism will increase a little bit to match that. And so that will kind of keep your body to about 80 kilos. Then we have, maybe you eat a little bit less. Now I'm talking just like a little bit less than your body needs that day. Then your metabolism will decrease a little bit to match that. So we know that your metabolism increases and decreases in response to food generally. And I would argue that I reckon if we were all just left alone to trust our bodies from being children and just eating intuitively our entire life, I feel like we'd all probably be at our set points. But there's a lot of things that influence that, and there's a lot of things that, we have so much diet culture that most people are on diets from such a young age. So like with our kind of weight going up and down, it's really normal for it to go up and down. Like it can go up and down in response to just normal day to day. If you sweat more, your weight might go down a little bit because you're losing a little bit of water. Drink a liter of water, your weight will go up a kilo. Pee 600 mils, your weight will go down 600 grams. It's normal for your body weight to fluctuate every day. Like it can fluctuate like up to 5 kilos on a day-to-day basis. And so that is normal. That is just like physiologically normal. When we menstruate as well, our body can hold more fluid. When we eat more carbohydrate foods, our body holds more glycogen, which is like the breakdowns of how carbohydrates are in our body, which holds more fluid attached to it, which on the flip side is also when you go on low carb diets, you experience this like 5 kilo fake weight loss. Like overnight, it's just your body's fluid shifts. It's not weight loss. And so, the fluid mass, there's always massive shifts there as well. So, your body fluctuates like every day. But there are things that can like influence that set point. So if we take the research that we do on weight loss, so generally it's not great. Like if we look at the studies that they do on weight loss, there's this one study that I like always look at or show my clients. And it is a study that took a whole lot of people, and they they put these different people in different groups. They put them on, like, it's a 6-month study, 6-month intervention. They did like behavioral therapy for weight loss. They did what was the other one? I think like a restricted diet for weight loss. And then they did a combination of both. And what they found, that these people lost, a substantial amount of weight for the 6 months, like I think 15 to 20 kilos is based on the study. However, everyone gained the weight back within 5 years. And that is essentially exactly the same thing that we see in absolutely everything, but they also gained more. So generally we find that if you intentionally try and lose weight, like go on a diet, so like this is based on all the dieting research, that you will lose the weight initially, but your body fights back against you. Your metabolism decreases, your hunger levels increase, and then so your body fights back, it gains the weight back, and it might feel like you're the failure because your body's gaining weight. What am I doing wrong? But it's not you, it is just your body. And then because our body doesn't like to be in that starvation, that famine, it gains more back. And then again, that just kind of starts off in this perpetual dieting cycle that many people find themselves on, which we kind of just get that weight gain trajectory over time with these continued episodes of dieting. So that's essentially a bit how weight works in a little bit of a nutshell.
No, you nailed it.
Yeah, I remember in our episode with Asher Lamy, Dr. Asher Lamy, he was mentioning about how weight cycling also can contribute to diabetes risk, increase your diabetes risk. It can increase your heart disease risk. It can increase a whole bunch of health factors, which people that like weight cycling is actually a core part of this.
Yes.
Which
people but they blame it then on their weight, don't they?
Dieting does the exact opposite of what they promise, essentially.
Yeah, but they wouldn't look at it being like it's the dieting. They'd be like, "Oh, it's your weight, right?"
Yeah, or it's you. And I think it's actually, I always think about this, like it's the smartest industry. Like, look, it's like you put people on diets, they lose weight, they gain it back, but they don't blame you, the dieting company. They blame themselves. So you keep on buying.
I just wasn't strong enough. I wasn't and it just as you were sort of saying like all of that, and I was just thinking to myself, I just don't understand then, like, and this could be just a whole, you don't have to answer this question because I don't know if anyone can ever understand. But like, why is it sprouted as the answer to so much, as in, so many medical conditions, so many, and I think, obviously I don't want you to attack your fellow dietitians, but I feel like, like we do have weight loss dietitians that are, do you know what I mean? And I just don't understand.
Yeah. So no, it's a really great question. And look, like, I come from a place of privilege as well. Like I always like to acknowledge that, being in a straight size body, talking with people who might not be in a straight size body about why they shouldn't lose weight. That's very, very difficult in a world that tells us that our body is wrong, that we should lose weight. And a lot of the times that is told from medical professionals. And the thing is, the studies with weight loss improving different factors, whether that's diabetes risk, like it reduces their blood sugar levels, blood glucose levels, whether it reduces their blood pressure, it's not technically wrong. Like that stuff still happens when you lose weight, whether it's the weight loss or whether it's because you change your diet and exercise habits. That's not really the issue. It's the fact that it doesn't stay off. That's the issue. It's the fact that, yeah, cool. Yeah, all these studies are like 3-month studies. Then like if you look at any long-term studies, it is just the same thing. It's people gain the weight back. And that's the thing that's missing. So like when medical professionals, dietitians, everyone, we look at, okay, these doing this can help, reduce all these things from a, internal medical perspective. It's just because it's short term. And I think we're seeing that a lot with Ozempic as well. Like if we look, like Ozempic's not been around very long, people are experiencing quote unquote good results, from it. But the when they come off
I
it,
know it's going to do long term.
it's exactly the same thing. You have to be on it long term for the rest of your life. You even see it in weight loss surgery, which I find is so, I work with a lot of people who have experienced weight loss surgery, and it's life changing for so many people. But the fear of weight regain that comes with that, and the normal the normal weight regain that also naturally happens after having weight loss surgery is horrendous. Like it really crushes your relationship with food, and so we even see these physiological effects of our body wanting to get back to the set point, even when we have things like weight loss surgery.
Interesting.
So it's just a bit hard. But like, look, I also don't necessarily like blame my colleagues, blame medical professionals, and even if they practice this way, because I used to practice that way as well. Like when I first graduated as a dietitian, I had no idea about any of this stuff. We had one lecture, but I don't know, it just didn't really sink in for some reason.
Yeah.
Our entire course is very weight centric. Doctors have their entire degree is very weight centric. They don't probably learn about this stuff nearly as in depth. And so I kind of used to practice that way, like, because that's all I knew. And it wasn't until I was like, oh, geez, like, let's have a look at this other side of things. And I realized that, okay, this is not okay that we're doing this. And that's why I completely shifted my way of practicing, because I saw it wasn't helping my clients, and so it, and like people don't know about the other side of not focusing on weight as well, and that's why, like,
Yeah.
today, like, people will see me for weight loss and I'll be like, hey, this is how I practice. I don't practice with weight loss. Happy to see you, but we do a different way. Because just no one knows that weight loss is not the answer.
Are they quite receptive of that usually? Like, do you get like quite a positive kind of, yeah, cool. That's really nice. That's really nice to hear, I think, because I feel like for so many people, yeah, like you said, they don't know there's another way. And, it's I guess it's not spoken about again. Like, it's not, if you don't know, you don't know. And I guess it's so easy in the eating disorder space. Like, yes, obviously it's not going to be about weight loss, like,
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess there's a lot of that education around, if you are in a fatter body, then, like it will be. But it's, that's a really nice thing to hear, I think, that people are quite receptive and do respond really nicely to that.
But it's almost like, okay, someone's giving you permission to finally not
100%.
have to
Yeah.
focus on weight loss.
Yeah, 100%.
Engage in a destructive kind of like, cycle almost.
Just, it's so hard, but you cannot control your weight on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, or even on a month-to-month basis. Yeah. It just doesn't happen. Which is just, and as much as, and again, to talk about, this can be honestly really horrible to hear and to be faced with. Every single message you're receiving is, you need to lose weight. Yeah. And as much as you'd like to, you just have to almost say, I can't control this anymore. And as much as life may be easier on a surface level, living in a smaller body, health-wise, mentally, biologically, it is not an easier life. And I know that's so easy for a straight-sized person to say, but it's so fucking unfair. It is so unfair.
Yeah. The world is so messed up.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary. Like, yeah. As you said earlier, about your daughters, it's really like, it's hard to think about sometimes. Like I remember when I found out I was having a girl, I was like, fuck. Like, I was excited, of course, but like, it's still this sense of like, well, I know. And it's not to say that, boys or men don't go through shit as well, because of course they do. But I think I don't know. I think as little girls, you get it a little bit more, don't you? Like, it's your appearance is commented on more. Or I saw this thing the other day. It was just like, this isn't really body related, but I think it's a bit related to like these expectations we have on just people. What did it say? If you've got a little boy, then you're probably exhausted because they've just got so much energy. And if you've got a little girl, then you're probably exhausted because they just never shut up. And I just felt so ick by it. I was just like, why are we placing these? Like, what? Like, I don't know if that, that just made me feel so ick.
I'm reading a really good book at the moment called Raising Girls Who Like Themselves, which highly recommend. It talks about, and I was literally listening to it in the car, and then this happened to me. It was talked about how like we treat little girls as dolls and we treat little boys as boys. It's just like the comments that we make. And then like I went into the petrol station and I had to pay for petrol, and then my partner had to pay for petrol after me. And I went into the petrol station, and then like the petrol station attendant was like to me, "Oh, how are you going, sweet pea?" And I was like, "Okay."
Oh, stop it.
Yeah. And then like when my partner went in next, and then he was like, "Oh," like when he came out, I was like, "Oh, like what did he say to you?" And he was like, "Oh no, like, hey, how you going?" And I was like, "Isn't that interesting that like, you know, like because I'm a girl, like you wouldn't say, 'Hey, sweet pea' to
No,
guy."
never. And it makes you feel so uncomfortable, doesn't it? It's just like,
yeah, but I think it's just like it was just like that tiny little representation of everything that happens in the world of like, just those expectations that, those little tiny messages. It's not even like massive, it's just all these messages that we all get all the time about how we should look, how we should act, what our body should look like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 100%. And even, like I have this conversation so much with people around like your nutritional needs and how like being a girl doesn't mean I need less. Like I remember really learning, especially with my partner, like I eat as much as he do, because why do I need less than him? Like I'm doing, just as much shit in a day as he is. Why would I need less? Or, sometimes I'll serve dinner and, like the his and hers plates. Like what a load of shit. Like, some nights I will eat less because maybe I'm not as hungry, but some nights I'll eat more because I am more hungry. Like it's just so twisted.
Yeah, it was a big sticking point when through my eating disorder, because I'm 5'10" and I've always been tall. I've been this height since I was 16, and I've just always had a bigger appetite, I guess, because, I guess I needed more because there's just more of me vertically. But it was always just this thing of girls and women are supposed to be small and petite. And I mean, I've been self-conscious about my height pretty much since jump, and I've always hated it. And it always meant that I was, broader on the shoulders. I had, bigger legs, all that kind of thing. And it was especially pertinent in my eating disorder because I remember it came up where, what you were talking about, Kiah, at the start, where you were watching videos about wellness and all that kind of stuff. And I would watch videos about eating disorders and things like that. And a lot of people's highest weights were sometimes my lowest weights. And it made me feel so insecure of like, I have to almost try twice as hard to get down to the numbers to be taken seriously because I'm taller, and I always have to, shrink myself even more because I'm taller. And it's just, this expectation of, let's be honest, of often gender stereotypes and gender roles and the bloody patriarchy. It all comes back to that in the end. But it's just these expectations that just cause wreak such havoc on you and the way that you view your life and the way that you feel that you need to be in the world. And like you were saying, Kelly, women aren't supposed to eat as much as men because we're supposed to be smaller.
Yeah, a load of shit.
I guess that kind of brings us to the last sort of question I kind of want to ask him to sort of close this out. And I know I always leave the last question to be like the hardest one to sort of summarize. But I guess, what are sort of the top 3 most common myths around food that you've encountered when it comes to eating disorders? If you could sort of debunk 3 myths as your parting gift to us, what would they be?
Yeah, good question.
Again, no pressure.
Yeah. Any particular requests?
I guess so say you have a client coming in, meeting you for the first time. What are the 3 most common questions that you get asked, or common misconceptions that you have to sort of debunk when you're sitting across from them?
Or challenge, or I guess work on challenging.
So I guess one of the things is I don't really like to talk about calories, but I think this is probably relevant with this, is often with eating disorders, we get fixated on calories. Majority of people need more than 2,000 calories a day to function. And I think that blows people's mind a lot of the time when we say that like 1,200 calories is what a toddler needs.
Literally.
And I think that's a big one and I think it's primarily comes from the fact that when we look at all these diets and stuff online and base all these calorie requirements, it's all like 1,400, 1,800, 1,600, all this sort of stuff.
Like have a snack for under 100 calories.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. And I'm like, you need heaps of food. You need heaps of food. Let's start, normalizing the fact that
humans
female,
need food.
Male, anyone,
Or on the back of labels, they always have, this is your daily the percentage of your daily intake. It's like you're automatically assuming everyone needs 2,000.
I know my intake, bro.
Yeah. And it's just like, and you see that it's like, whoa, 20%. I can't eat that. That's way too much. Like you probably need way more than that. And also that's fine. Eat
also a really confusing way to think about your food as well. Like
exactly.
Yeah. So that's really a big one. Okay. Another one that I see all the time. Carbs. Carbs are bad for me. Carbs are the enemy. Carbs cause inflammation. Yeah. Carbs are important for you. They break down into glucose, which is your body's main fuel source. Your body needs glucose to survive. Your brain can only survive off glucose.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like there's no like protein can't fucking fuel your brain.
Wow.
Your metabolism can switch into use other fuels like as a source. So it can your body can function off fats and proteins. However, those proteins and fats have to convert themselves to glucose for your brain to work. So
and it's harder work.
It's harder. Right? It's a lot of work. Yeah. And it's very difficult to keep it in that state.
I love that. Oh my God.
Yeah. So that's
put that on a shirt.
That's a new one to use.
Yeah, maybe that's what I should have on my slogan on my shirts. Your body needs glucose carbs to survive. Yeah.
Put it on a shirt, put it on a mug, put it on a sticker, everywhere.
Yeah.
A new embody health post on Instagram. Thanks.
Your body runs on glucose. Carbs are the best way. Just
eat the carbs. Yeah.
Just eat the damn carbs.
Yeah. That's definitely, a really common one. And what's another one? Oh, I would say one food is going to cause major issues to your body. I think that you talked about the orthorexia, morphing into that, food is more than just fuel for the body. Yes, it is, but it's also social connection. It's also hanging out with friends. It's also having the chocolate on Friday night, having chocolate on Friday night is not going to, do harm to your body. It's fine to have it. It's important to have that. Yeah. And that's kind of why we talk about having lots of different things, chocolate still has some great nutrition in it. It's still got energy. Your body, at the end of the day, in terms of what your body actually needs, it needs calories, it needs food, it needs energy. And if chocolate provides it for you, that is great.
100%.
It's got fats in it. Your body needs fats to survive as well. That's going to help your hormone functions. So it's kind of labeling good and bad food. At the end of the day, food just breaks down into nutrients and your body uses it. Your body doesn't know if it's quote unquote good or bad or what labels we put on it. It's all just food.
Just the same, right? Yeah. I had a client say to me the other day, I just feel like there's just too much sugar in my diet. I'm just eating too much sugar. I was like, bro, what else is in there though? You're not just eating a packet of sugar, are you? There's literally how many other things in that thing that you're eating. So not that there's anything wrong with sugar because let's face it, it gives you some good energy, and it's delicious.
And it's carbs and glucose and your body needs that to survive.
Exactly right. Exactly right. See, it's just why are we reducing things down to be so simple? Your body's not that stupid. It's actually really smart. Yeah.
There's only very few foods that you shouldn't eat. Foods that you're allergic to.
Gluten for me. I'm a celiac.
Yeah. If the food is going to kill you or harm you or hurt you, don't eat it.
Yeah.
And also don't eat foods that genuinely you do not like. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly right. Oh, thank you so much.
This has been so good. You remind me actually a lot of my dietitian from when I was going through eating disorder treatment, and I absolutely
It's a
adore
big
her.
compliment. Big
Oh,
compliment.
thank you.
Very much so. Sorry, yes, I probably should have prefaced that. That's a massive compliment.
Yeah.
It's just the way that you're very calm and sensible and very matter of fact, and you're very understanding.
Yeah, I
And
love
you
that.
know,
Just the very calm and just factual way that you speak. Like I could actually like listen to you speak all day. Like I don't know if you know this, but you have a very calming voice.
Oh, really? That's so funny. Well, you can listen to 50 hours of me on my podcast if you really wanted to. That's so funny. I actually don't think I have a calming voice, so it's interesting that you
Oh,
say
you
that.
so do.
Yeah.
Like
very
it's
much
so
so.
like smooth and just calming. Anyway,
Okay.
I'm
Well,
used to my voice, which is like
I love this. Yeah.
Well, please tell us, please tell everyone listening where they can find you, where they can listen to you, any way you want to plug, do it now.
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on my personal Instagram at Nutrition by Kiah, so Kiah, or on our Embody Health Instagram at Embody Health, which is IMBODI Health. And you can also find us on our website, www.embodyhealth.com. And feel free to listen to our podcast, Embody Health Podcast, on Spotify or Apple, and hope to hear from you soon.
All of those links will be in the show notes as per usual. So you can go like right now. You should be scrolling, clicking on all of them. We'll wait. We'll wait.
I'm really going in with the pressure today. Jesus. Yeah.
As long as you're not driving.
Yes, don't do that if you're driving.
Be safe.
Thank you so much, Kiah. This has been a very long overdue conversation, and I hope that everyone listening can find something really helpful in all of this, because I certainly learned a bunch of stuff. My brain is brought to you by glucose. Thank you.
I was going to say Ash's brain when glucose is just blowing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great chat.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's all for today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review as well, because that always helps, if you like what you hear, of course. Follow us on Instagram at pavedwithgoldpod. Send us an email at pavedwithgoldpod@gmail.com, or visit our website, pavedwithgoldpodcast.com. All of those links will be in the show notes, along with extra resources and where you can find Kiah. Just go click down there when it's safe to do so. Until next time.
Not while driving.
Not while driving. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is general in nature and has not taken your personal circumstances or medical history into account. We are here to share our own experiences and the things that we have found helpful throughout our own personal recovery journeys. Please remember that each person's journey and circumstances are different, and not all of the information contained in this podcast may be relatable to you. It's important you consult your own GP or recovery team to seek out tailored advice before making any important decisions relating to your own health and recovery process. If you have found any of the content in this episode distressing, please contact your care team or a medical professional. If you or someone you know is in crisis and needs help now, please contact emergency services in your region immediately.